welcome Pensacola to another edition of Black History. And, February is Black History Month, and I wanted to do something on Pensacola's Black History. And I walked around and wondered about who can I tap to talk about Pensacola Black History. And then it came to me that nobody knows more about Pensacola Black History than this man here. Okay, that is Mr. Martin Lewis. Martin, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, no problem. We want to talk today about Black history, and I want to get your impression, because I know you know a lot about Black history and a lot about Pensacola Black history, and we got a rich history here in Pensacola. And so can you help me? Can you help us to guide us through some of the great history? I know you, I tell you what, the first place, let's start off, since I know you're associated with the, with St. Joseph Church and that community and how that is a vital part of our history and how that all started about, okay? Can we start with that?
Okay, we can start with St. Joseph, the beginning. All members of St. Joseph.
We can start. You can start whatever you want to start at. Okay.
Okay, all members of St. Joseph were originally members of St. Michael's Church, and a lot of these members who were members of St. Michael's Church, their families go back to Spanish Pensacola. Many of these families were. Some of them were freemen who came with the lunar, and after the lunar, there have always been some free blacks here in Pensacola. But they all became Catholic. They were members of St. Michael's Church. The problem they had at St. Michael's was the fact that they could go to church there and they could do everything else, but they had to sit in the back, and they really couldn't do anything except sit. They formed an organization called St. Joseph Society, which was to take care of the welfare of the black members of the parish.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, at a time, they got tired of all that stuff. They wanted to be able to, do something in church other than just sit back there and go to communion and a few other things. So they went to the bishop and asked the bishop, could they have a church for I played with this word Creoles and blacks. It was Creole because St. Joseph eventually was a Creole parish.
Yeah.
But the bishop agreed to that. And as a result of that, they searched around and they gave us, they bought the property where St. Joseph is located at now. It was supposed to have been a black and Creole parish. But at the same time, immigrants were coming over from Europe. And that was the funny thing about the situation, was the fact that under European standards, immigrants who had money could go to St. Michael's. But those who were broke, they had to go to St. Joseph's Catholic Church until they got some money. Patties and other outstanding families who have money now, they were original members of St. Joseph. And when some of them got money, they could leave St. Joseph and then they could go to St. Michael's. But the black and Creole families that were at St. Joseph, they traced their lineage back to early Spanish period. And they sort of carried on this tradition within their own little community. Some agree, some disagree, but that's where things were.
Okay. Now, who did they? Do you know who did they bought that land from St. Parish? St. Joseph.
The church property was bought from John Sunday. Story goes that he was supposed to have built his house in that area, but his sister Mercy Dee's Sunday Ruby, she persuaded him to. Someone said John Sunday didn't give nothing, but he sold them the property. And on this site, they built their first church, and then they built their present church. One thing about his sister, Mercedes Ruby, she was married to a guy named Valerie Ruby. His father came to Pensacola in 1789 to fight the Battle of Pensacola with Galvez, and he remained here. He was a black Frenchman, Spanish, or however you want to present him, but that's another famous black individual. Spanish soldier, French soldier, came to Pensacola, fought the Battle of 1789, which helped end the American Revolution because it cut off the supply line from Florida. So with that input, they had a very large family. They became a very prominent family in the community.
Okay. Now, speaking of St. Joseph's Church, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps I am wrong, but I just want to set the record straight. The first black priest was that Father Holly? Or was there another first black priest before at St. Joseph? But this one, we're talking Pensacola history.
Father Holly was never a pastor, a priest at St. Joseph. He attended
Really?
St. Joseph's school. He was educated through St. Joseph.
Okay.
But when he became a priest, he was a member out in Cantonment at St. Jude.
Okay.
But the rest of the family are members of St. Joseph, and the Holly family has a large connection with St. Joseph. But Father Holly, now Bishop Holly, he was the first black priest in the diocese that I know of.
Okay. Okay, well, that is a bit of good local Pensacola history because he was the first black priest of the diocese. Okay, and rather than that. Oh, okay, very good. That's even better, don't you think? How do you?
Now, the first.
Go ahead.
The first black priest that we have, and that's going to be contentious, was our past priest. I'd rather not call his name, but he is from a Creole heritage. He sees himself as Creole, but he has relatives at St. Joseph who came from the Mobile area. But he would have been our first black priest. But those who know are fine, but I don't want to put his name out in public. A lot of people know him.
We know who you're talking about. Let me ask you this: how did you get so knowledgeable regarding local black history?
Well, I always had an interest in history, and when I was small, my first interest was actually in St. Joseph history. There was an elderly lady who I would sometimes go home with. She was working at the school, and after school, I would go home with her, and I would stay with her until my mother came and picked me up. But while there, she was telling me some of these old stories about Pensacola history and things like that. Later, her name was Marcellus Bowens. Her husband was a ship captain, and he went out to caught fish and stuff. He went out one time, and he never came back. So from that point on, she was there by herself, but she would tell me old stories about Pensacola.
Oh, that would pique your interest into history. I'm pretty much I'm pretty well a history buff myself. I love history, and I was telling somebody just yesterday that I didn't realize I was interested in history until I took a college course, and the professor told what I said, both sides of the story. Sometimes history is just what it means, his story, but when he told both sides, he told the good, the bad, and the ugly. I said, "Hey, wait a minute, more to this than what meets the eye," and that got me curious about different events in history, and I started studying because when they didn't tell the other side of the story, so I had to research and find out, okay, what's the other side of this story is about. And that what got me interested as well in local history.
Well, sometimes you do have to look at that way. See, a lot of, we talk about black history, we talk about slavery. But, Pensacola was founded by the Spanish, and they had a different system of slavery than the English did. So in a lot of here in Pensacola, you had slaves, and even into the time prior to the Civil War, Pensacola did not have a plantation economy. They brought slaves to work,
Mm-hmm.
and they would hire these slaves out. They built Fort Pickens and some of the other forts, and they would hire them out to work. And the system went in most situations where uh, the slave owner would get part of the money, and the slave would get a portion of the money. Since we didn't have any huge plantations or what have you, you didn't have no slave quarters or what have you. A lot of these slaves lived on their own. It was just the mentality of the thing. You knew you were a slave, but you did have some freedoms that people in other areas, like in Alabama, Mississippi, couldn't have possibly dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like you got to go to slave quarters tonight. You went to wherever you were staying at, and I don't know how they kept their count of who was where, but uh, that's how the slaves in Pensacola pretty much existed. I guess it's just some of them were sort of like quasi-free. Well, it was like Jim Crow. You know what you
Yeah.
could and you know what you couldn't do, and as long as you didn't cross the line, you were great.
Okay. Now you were born and raised here in Pensacola. Am I correct?
Right, I was born and raised here in Pensacola.
Okay. Now, how far back can you remember in terms of before segregation and some of the history? I just want to share with folks that wasn't originally from here, and those are the folks that were here that lived it. And I'm not originally from here, but I think we have an awesome history that needs to be told, and the history of the blocks and many other Bruce Beach and all those kind of things. Can you delve into some of those for me?
Yeah, back in the days, I would say the Great Migration, when people were leaving the South and going north,
Right.
everybody didn't go north. People in Alabama areas and other areas, they came to Pensacola. Uh, during at the at the fall of the Confederacy here in Pensacola, most of the population, the white population, left Pensacola and moved to Greenville, Alabama, and they stayed there until the end of the war.
Oh,
So while
can I pause there for 1 minute?
yeah,
Why Greenville?
I guess it was further enough inland because of the Union Army never did, as far as I know, never did invade Greenville.
Okay.
They generally invaded along the coastlines that they could reach, but there were many southern towns Union soldiers never actually went into. So they felt that they were far enough away,
Okay.
and it sort of led to local treasure stories. They couldn't take everything. Some people buried their valuables in certain spots, and when they came back, they had trouble finding it. So a lot of treasure stories about Pensacola, pretty much true. That stuff buried out there that was never found. But the slaves are the people who lived in the area. They heard about Pensacola, and they realized that Pensacola might be a good place to go. So when they came to Pensacola, they found out that there were a lot of free blacks. The blacks were educated. They had a prominent position in society here in Pensacola. In fact, at the time of the 1890s, blacks outnumbered whites in Pensacola.
Mm.
So when they got here, if they had some gump and go, they could have a fantastic life here in Pensacola. You had a big black middle class. A lot of these white families, they came from Spanish families and what have you, so they were used to being around blacks. There was really no fear of blacks. So they got along quite well. They built shops and they sold things to white and black. Businesses were downtown on Palafox and in the area. But as more and more whites from Alabama moved in, the Jim Crow thing actually cut in. And it had a large effect on the blacks in Pensacola. Many left, most stayed. Like uh, Dr. Williams, he had a drugstore downtown. Sam Charles, shoe store. Sam Charles was allowed to stay downtown. Dr. Wiggins had to move out and relocated to the Belmont and Villa Street area, as well as a lot of other black businesses. But sometimes what they don't mention is that there were some black businesses, they might have been on a side street or what have you, they stayed downtown and
Mm.
never did leave because they were stores that whites wanted to do business with. Like Sam Charles was an outstanding shoe store, so they kept him. But with the coming of Jim Crow, they were slowly forced, and with the increase of whites from Alabama, they were forced into the Belmont and Villa Street area, which was a white neighborhood at one time.
Hmm.
Moved in and they created the black neighborhood of Belmont and Villa Street area. And they prospered, they grew, but like all good things must come to an end. The thing that made us prosper and grow was segregation.
Gation, right.
We supported our business. We went there, shop. You can do anything in the Belmont and Villa Street area that you could do downtown. In fact, 95% of chances you could do everything you want in the Belmont and Villa Street without even going downtown. There were stores. There was a furniture store. There were doctors. There were lawyers, funeral homes, churches, ice cream shops, and anything else you could probably think of that you would need that would not make it necessary for you to go downtown and shop, except for some things. And
Okay.
we stayed like that until segregation of Jim Crow came to an end, and we slowly started spreading our wings to go where we couldn't go before. And like in most of all our black communities throughout the United States, that brought about the decline of the black business district.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this question: why Belmont and the Villa? What was so attracted by that section of the town?
I really don't know, but I have an impression that John Sunday had bought a property in that area. Uh, Besides being a contractor and a builder, John Sunday also dealt in real estate. And he
Hmm.
had a whole lot of real estate. So in that particular area, he was able to sell property in that area. And as you know, as sometime when blacks move in, whites move out.
Right.
But as you know, in the past, in Pensacola history, it never quite happened that way. Blacks may move in, but whites don't always move out. So like on the fringes, you had your whites and then you had your blacks. I remember people telling me that I think like Roof Street, where the block of St. Cyprian is on, runs north and south. People who lived on that street, people who lived on the west side of the street, they were black. People on the east side of the block were white. And many of them, they said, hey, I had my white friends. We played together with each other through the fence. So then you had other areas where you would go in and you would find 3 or 4 white families in a black enclave. Just the opposite, you'll find blacks in the white area. So uh, they did not necessarily rush out. They stayed. Uh, the area where I'm at, East Hill, they said it was going to turn black. It never did turn all black. It always remained a mixed neighborhood.
Mm. Okay. Alrighty. Now, the areas you know the sections of the black sections of town like Shannon Town and educate us on all those different sections of town and basically why those sections of town. For an example, when Old Gulf Power, was that Shannon Town down where Florida Power Lights are right now, the area?
That was what was that area called? The McCarvers had a large enclave down there. No, I
Hmm.
don't think that. I would not say I know what it was called, but I cannot pull it to mind.
Okay.
But if you note the housing patterns in most of your southern cities, they managed to put blacks on one side of the town and whites on the other side.
Right.
But if you notice in Pensacola, there is no such creature.
Right.
You have pockets of black and you have pockets of white. But you don't cross the track and all of a sudden all you see is black folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have noticed that about Pensacola, and one of the things I think you was talking about people moving up to Greenville and why people were kind of attracted to Pensacola. Back, I guess, in the 1700s and before we had roads and United States government had horse paths and stuff like that to get to from one part of the country to the other where the Native American granted them permission to go. Well, one of the things that I think that they created was the old Federal Road. I don't know how much you know about the old Federal Road that they ran from Washington through Atlanta, down through Montgomery, down through obviously Greenville and Burnt Corn. But in Burnt Corn, then that Federal Road actually split into two different paths, okay? One of the paths called Three Notch Way, and the other path called the Old Wolf Trail. The Three Notch Way was westward going towards New Orleans, okay? And then, but the Old Wolf Trail is going south to directly to Pensacola. And so everybody used that trail to come to Pensacola because Pensacola was probably one of the trading routes that people used, Native Americans as well as anybody that got to want to get on the coast and get to Pensacola. So that was probably the attraction for people to come to Pensacola because they had a route to get here, and plus Pensacola was a port town. And also, we talking about the diversity of Pensacola, because we lived under so many flags in Pensacola, so many countries that they brought in different types of people, and and different ones, and it kind of mixed them up together. Now, let's go back to the Creole, as you call it, the Creole, okay? Now, when we talk about Creole, we kind of associate Creoles with New Orleans and French and all those kinds of folks like that. How did we end up with a community of Creole people in Pensacola?
Okay, they have been here since the beginning. The Spaniards had a rule. They only sent men over. They told their soldiers that they could cohabitate with the native population, but they couldn't marry them. So when they came to Pensacola, what Indians who were here, what slaves they brought with them, they took these women or men or however they were going, and they had children with them. But for many of these families, as far as they were concerned, they couldn't marry them, but they still considered them to be their family. In some cases, in St. Michael's records, you'll see where a Spaniard or someone else, they would attest in the records that this child was theirs. And they were families. They lived together. And as you know, as you marry, you get lighter, you get darker. And the thing about Creoles is the fact that a lot of people get used to the old thing of Creole, almost white, can't tell the difference. But Creoles range from brown to I don't know what you are. But that existed from Pensacola, I can say, as far as New Orleans. I know it existed on the other side into Texas, but I don't know too much about that section. But there was constant travel between Pensacola, Mobile, Mississippi, Pensacola, back and forth. People moved from Mobile to New Orleans, from New Orleans to Pensacola, and they just got all mixed up. They moved for convenience. Some move in order to pass. You go to another town, they don't know what you are, so you can be whatever you want to be. But that's how the coloring got in there. But now all Creoles are not looking white. It's just as brown as anyone else. It's the heritage. It has nothing to do with what color they are. It has to do with their family background. Their ancestors were Indian, Spanish, French. But the one common thing that had to be there, you had to have black blood.
Yeah.
And that's how the Creole, you find it here along the Gulf Coast area. You have it someplace in some other cities of the United States, but they generally don't refer to themselves as Creoles. They call themselves something else.
Yeah.
Like there's a large white, half white population in Atlanta. They don't refer to themselves as Creoles. I don't know what they call themselves. But
Okay.
that's from the mixing of white and Indian and Spanish and French, and they produced children. Some who became Creole, all they wanted to do was just be, I'm a Creole, and I'm
Hmm.
going to live my life. You had others, yeah, hey, I can pass. I'm going to pass. If I see you, don't talk to me. I don't know you. I have a relative in my family. She told the family that she was going to California and don't even look for her because they wouldn't find her. So you had these type of situations. You had people who were just happy with their heritage. Then you had other people who want to be white and they use it as an opportunity. When
Yeah.
Jim Crow finally hit Pensacola in 1920s, some Creole families had already gone north and gone west. The ones who went, they sent for the ones who were still here who could pass. That's why you look around and say, I don't see any half white black. Most of the ones who were really that light, their families took them
Hmm.
north or even took them to California.
Okay.
But
What?
that's the Creole situation.
Okay. What's the difference between a Creole and a mulatto?
Nothing. Uh, generally, generally mulatto refers to if uh, most people who say almost look white,
Hmm.
they would probably be mulattoes because they look upon mulattoes as being English and black.
Okay.
If
Okay.
if if your grandfather was a white man, he's from England, they would refer you to as a mulatto.
Okay.
If you had French and Spanish ancestry, they would look upon you as being Creole. But basically, it's just a play on words.
Yeah. But if you black on black, they looked up on you as what? No, don't answer that. Okay.
But then a lot of time in that situation, and I have problems with things today. Uh, I want to put it. I don't want. If you act properly or right,
Hmm.
you're fine. But if you live up to the stereotypical concept they have of black, you got problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the problem we're having with our new generation. Uh, they just go wild, and what they're doing is not something that a lot of whites are going to accept or tolerate with because you know the old thing in the South. I'm not going to say the word, but Bob Smith over here, Vern is my best friend. I'd do anything in the world for him. I'll eat after him. I'll drink after him. If somebody mess with him, I'll fight him. But the rest of those folks over there, uh-uh.
You know what?
That's always been the situation in the South.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let on turn the page and let's talk a little bit about the beaches here. Okay. I know that was Bruce Beach. I know that was a Wingate Beach, and I know that was a Johnson Beach. Okay. Can you talk about those three beaches in specifically? And you might, if there was any other one, let me know because I know those three are the three famous ones that I can that people can relate to.
Well, you also had, from what I recall, but some of those getting before my time, Lighthouse Beach, which is on the Navy Yard. At one
Okay.
time, that was a black beach. Uh, there was another. There were a couple of other black beaches. I know one of them they were owned by blacks, but they were eventually closed. But like
Mm-hmm.
Wingate, that was a private family beach. The family owned it and it was set up for blacks. Uh, Johnson Beach, once again, blacks got together as a group and they put the money together and they built a hut out there. I remember way back when I was small, there was a wooden house that stood out there on top of the sand.
Yeah.
And later on, I think the county or what came in and they built a new concrete, the old star-shaped place and what have you. They continued to operate that for a while until they finally gave it up. But those are the two designated black beaches. In Pensacola, if you were black, you went to Johnson Beach, or either you went to Wingate Beach.
Mm-hmm.
The other beaches that they had, like I said, that was before my time, but there were other black beaches that were set aside for blacks. But no, you did not go to Pensacola Beach
Okay.
or either some of these other places. That was
Well,
off, unless you can go over there and find you go way down somewhere where no one to see you.
now with Bruce Beach, well, that was a valuable beach for black folks during back in the day. No.
Bruce Beach was never really a beach. It was a dry ship facility where they would haul ships in to repair them.
Mm-hmm.
They would water very, very deep out there. They would haul the ships in, they would work on them, and then they would send them back out. But being in the city, that was the only body of water that blacks in that area had. They would go down there and they would swim.
Right.
But people drown. You take maybe 10 feet offshore and you fall, drop right in and go down.
Right.
Plus, they were riding pilings from when they stopped doing the ship. But people go down there, and, they would sit on the beach. Remember one time they put some pavilions up with electricity and a shelter. If you brought your light bulb and a battery, you could have music and light at night if you wanted to have something in the evening. Then they finally built the pool, which were for blacks only.
Okay.
Bruce's Beach, basically, it was a black beach. But, everything wasn't segregated. Uh, they used the beach. It was like with the Creoles and what have you. As long as you were west of west of Palafox and south of Garden, integration went on down there. They played together, they ate together, they slept at each other's houses. But the trouble is, once you cross those two streets, nobody knew nobody until you cross back into that line.
Okay. Now tell me this. Now, when I came to Pensacola, that bridge was you can get into Johnson Beach. They had built this big bridge and high-rise bridge over there. Before then, because I know Johnson Beach been in existence since the early 50s, if not earlier. How did people get? Because that's a distance from here. Okay. So how did people get to Johnson Beach?
Must have been a wooden bridge, or it had to be a wooden bridge because I can't see people taking boats from that short distance.
Okay.
Either Johnson didn't exist. Everybody was going to either Wingate or these couple other black beaches that I told you about that I can't remember the names of because that was before my time. That's where they were going. I think it was probably when they finally put a stable bridge in that blacks went over there, made a deal with the county, what have you, got some land to rent and what have you, and created the Black Beach. Because
Yeah.
at that time, that was the only people who went to Johnson Beach were blacks because
Yeah.
that road that runs down the rest didn't exist. It ended right there at Johnson's parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
blacks were the only ones who were in that area.
Yeah. The for a little bit of black history, for local black history, that beach was named after Rosalind Johnson. Did you know Rosalind Johnson, any of the Johnson folks there?
I knew some of the Johnson family, but I didn't know him. He was still like a little bit older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I know, he joined. He was underage and he
Yeah.
died, and that's how the beach got named after him.
Yeah, that was for folks that don't know about it. Yeah, he joined the army when he was at age 15, and the reason he joined the army was because economically he wanted an opportunity to help his family, and so. But in the meanwhile, while he's there in the army, I think he got stationed in Germany. I can't remember, but this is during the Korean War when he fought and something happened, I guess, and they got pinned down or something to the effect. But he was instrumental in getting his buddies out of harm's way, and he had got 2 or 3 of them out of harm's way. And when he went back for I guess for the last one, he somehow became fatally injured there, and so and he was the first person from Escambia County to die in the Korean War, and so that's why he got some notoriety. Thank goodness he got some notoriety about that, and so and I don't know exactly how they ended up with that. I don't even know what it was called before it was designated Johnson Beach. Okay, it was called something, but you were absolutely correct. And Joe Herron, I know you probably know Joe Herron. Joe Herron know a lot about. He did the studies of Johnson Beach, and that hut you said that they built there. Actually, I can't think of the man's name, but he was a white biker. He built that hut there, and for the to sell, I guess to make money off of black folks. I guess I don't know. I guess that was his intent was, but at least that's what happened. But anyway, it wasn't a bad thing as far as we were concerned, because it gave us an opportunity to have some leisure time and get some coats and stuff like that as well. And so they decided to designate that area as Johnson Beach in honor of Rosalind Johnson at the time, and then of course over time that area got started to dilapidate, and so I believe it was when the National Park Service took over those national seashores and those areas there. Then that was an effort for the National Park Service to officially designate that area as Johnson Beach and to Rosalind Johnson. You know, of course, every year they have a ceremony there every year, and so, and even from Burnt Corn, Alabama, I knew that we couldn't go to Pensacola Beach, so everybody that come to Pensacola that wanted to go to the beach, we knew Johnson Beach was famous, because everybody knew that was the place to be. We didn't know much about not Bruce's Beach, the other one, Wingate. We didn't know much about Wingate, and simply probably because, like you say, Wingate was a private beach as well. So, but the public beach was Johnson Beach as we knew it. Okay, so did you have an opportunity to go to Johnson Beach when you was?
Well, when I was small, the earliest thing I remember about going to Johnson Beach was all the white sand, and I remember this wooden building that had these steps that went. I think I might have gone in it.
Yeah.
But I do remember the building. There was nothing there but that building. Mm-hmm. And then later on, the other development came. I'd always only known it as Johnson. It may not have been officially declared Johnson Beach. I remember, about 15 years back, they finally officially dedicated and made it official that this is Johnson Beach.
Yeah.
But I think people just call it Johnson Beach.
Yeah, sure did. We had an opportunity to interview his mother before she passed as well. So she talked a little bit about it. She said she didn't even realize at the time, when they named it after her son, and that it was Johnson Beach, but she was real honored that somebody decided to do that. Okay, I'll continue.
But I've been saying, this was just another example of, pros and cons of segregation and Jim Crow. Jim Crow goes, and we let go, and what we had, slow dissipation, disappears. Same thing happened there at Johnson.
Yeah. If you know me, I'm one of these people that says, and it always get taken the wrong way, but I'm going to say it anyway. I said sometime I think integration was one of the worst things that could happen to us as a people, because
you can join me on that one.
Okay.
You can join me on that's the worst thing that, it did a lot for us, but as a group of people,
right,
it has really hurt us.
It did, because segregation at least forced us to have our own, okay.
Yeah,
But then we gave it up in pursuing of a dream, okay, and and making other people own, if you will. So,
yeah,
but hopefully that's a lesson is learned from that, Martin. That we still need black businesses, black organizations, black churches. We need everything black like we did before integration, and we need each other just as much as we done during segregation,
segregation.
like we did after integration.
Hmm.
So
But as I said, doing that, life was basically good here in Pensacola for blacks if you compare it with some other cities.
yeah,
As I
yeah,
say, as long as you went along with the game, hey, folks treated you fine. You didn't have any problems. They take care of you. Sometimes I get upset when some people start talking about Jews. And my
hmm,
thing is, I said, you realize that here in Pensacola, if it wasn't for the Jewish population, we would have had a long problem because the Jews were the first to do a whole lot of things for black folks, give
yeah,
them top jobs and what have you. And they, well, it's the new generation. Most of them, they didn't even know anything about Belmont and Villa.
yeah,
Other day, I was talking, the black doctors don't know who they are.
yeah.
There's a lifespan in Pensacola history that young blacks know nothing about because the fact that they all grew up under integration, know nothing about segregation, how things work.
Right, exactly right. And you speaking of our Jewish brothers, Martin. I know they did a lot for black people. They did immensely a lot for black folks. Uh, there was a Jewish person by the name of Mr. Rosenwald. He was part of Seals and Roebuck. He
Hmm.
went throughout the South building schools. Well, otherwise,
Yeah,
black folk wouldn't have schools, and that's where you had a
yeah,
lot of those Rosenwald schools. You can see them throughout many communities in the South because
yeah,
he and his money and his endowment made a conscious effort to do that. So it's really is a blessing. That as my grandmother, she always had a saying that God take care of babies and food. So He looked out for us, and in many ways He sure did. So, but let's get back to Pensacola history. And I know when the communities, Shannontown, help me with these communities, Shannontown and the Tan Yard.
yeah.
Let's talk about the Tan Yards for a minute.
Oh,
Why is it the
Hawkshaw,
Tan Yards?
Hawkshaw, Hawkshaw.
Hawkshaw, right? And the Hawkshaw
I
is
think Hawkshaw was.
that
I think Hawkshaw is the one you keep calling Chinatown. Hawkshaw was down there by where Gus Power is, I
good
believe.
fight. Yeah, exactly. That was Hawkshaw. Well, where was Shannontown?
Chinatown was somewhere up towards the northwest somewhere.
Hmm.
I never did have a precise location of where Chinatown would be because I mean I don't want to
Yeah,
sound uppity or what have you, but those are areas that I never associated in.
yeah, yeah. So
You know, my
Hawks.
my total life was in the Belmont and Villa Street in the Tan Yard.
Oh, really? In the Tan? Why did they name the Tan Yard, Martin?
Long, long time ago, the there was a tannery. Uh, these Englishmen traded with the Indians for tans. They would come down, they'd bring their furs, and when they brought the furs, they'd buy the furs, and they would strip them and tan them. So right below where St. Joseph's Church is, on the water,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that little old house you see there,
Mm-hmm.
that was the mansion for the people who owned it. The Indians would bring them down, and that's where they would boil them at, and they would hang them up and go through the process of whatever tanning is, and then they would sell the tans to Europe.
Mm-hmm. And so,
But
so how did black folks start accumulating them? Because of the jobs or where they worked in that area, and then they started living in the area? Why it become associated as an all black, most of the black community? Or was it most of the black community?
now, originally it was a mixture of some of everyone. You had Creoles in the area, you had your beachcombers, what you want to call them, fishermen and what have you. The
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood was mostly white and Creoles and a few blacks. But as the years went by, more and more blacks started moving into the area. But talking to some of my church members who lived there all their life, they said a while back there was not a whole lot of blacks living in Tanyard. The growth of blacks in the Tanyard became a recent event. And some people who think they know all about the Tanyard, I heard one girl say, I'm bad because I'm from the Tanyard. So this girl don't know about no doggone Tanyard because there was not a whole lot of blacks in the Tanyard. They were mostly Creoles and a few blacks, and then you had these beachcombers and immigrants. That's who lived there.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
in maybe the 60s, more blacks started moving to the area. Well, you always had the thing, transfer of culture. Whites
Mm.
move out, blacks move
Move
in.
in, right? Exactly. Exactly. I always had this question because with black folks generally, black folks are Baptists and Methodists and so forth, and then when I was where I was born and raised, we didn't have a Catholic community at all. I Catholic was something new to me when I came to Pensacola, and but even though I've heard of the Catholic Church, but then when I began to see who were members of the Catholic Church, Martin, but everything makes sense. Once I learned more about everything makes sense. I used to see that most of them. I mean, I can't say all, but most of the members of Saint Joseph and the Black Catholic Church, if you will. I don't know whether there's such thing as a Black Catholic Church according to the
Oh,
Catholic
there is.
churches. So, but you say it is.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I want you to hold that point.
Hold on.
Hold that point for a minute, okay? But at any rate, I always saw those all of the folks that were light skinned, and I always wondered. I said, well, why aren't there any dark skinned folks at the Catholic Church? I'm sure there were, but majority of them were light skinned. But I think you answered the question. Well, I actually learned that the real reason for that is because there was more Creole than and most Creole and those folks are more Catholic, service Catholicism, as opposed to maybe Baptists or Methodists. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, you're on the right track. In the area, most of the people were Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were light skinned or whether or not they were brown. Even during slavery, they were
And in the
Catholic.
okay, hold
I
on,
mean,
hold
I
on.
mean,
Are
I
you
mean,
saying in the Pensacola, most of the black folks in Pensacola area were Catholics?
yeah, a lot of them were Catholic.
Ah.
If you could say check your church, I wouldn't say roster, but if you got up in church, your church, and
Mm-hmm.
asked people if their grandparents were Catholic or great grandparents, you'll be surprised. There was a
Really?
whole lot of blacks who left the Catholic Church because the Baptists, probably the Baptists, I hate to say, no, I'm not going to say that. The Baptists were more emotional. And as black folks, we like beat, we like to feel, and what have you. And, they gravitated towards something that was more inclined with them. But you'd
Uh-huh.
be surprised how many black people here in Pensacola were Catholic.
Mm.
And some people still look. I met one guy at the barber shop. He said, yeah, I define myself as a Baptist Catholic, whatever that means.
Okay.
But yeah, he had a large number, but a lot of them have left the Catholic Church. And a lot of, the Catholic Church is not an emotional religion. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to make you want to fall on the floor and cry and scream and
And
run
and
up and
and,
down the aisle and what
but-
have you.
and trying to reach for the Holy
And
Ghost, huh?
yeah, but for most people who are black, Native American, Spanish, we have that in us. You beat some drums and stuff, and we want to move. So that's the thing is that but at one time just about everybody, all blacks in Pensacola were Catholic, because even slave owners required their slaves to be Catholic. But as things changed and more Protestantism moved into the area, people started to go. What's the church in Hawkshaw?
Yeah, the oldest church. I was thinking about that as you was talking. I can't remember the name of it, but
I mean, that was
John the Baptist. Is it John the Baptist?
Maybe John the Baptist.
Yeah.
If you go back and you can check their records, you'd be surprised how many of the people were former Catholic. A lot of them went there because when things got moved, where they were living at in Hawkshaw, it was closer for them to go to John the Baptist than try to walk to St. Joseph. So a lot of that happened that way.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes plenty of sense. Now, go back to what you were saying earlier. I'm going to go back to your point about there is a black Catholic church.
There is the Catholic Church. As you know, the Catholic Church is the same wherever you go.
Right.
Only difference, since we don't use Latin anymore, it's in whatever country you're in now, it's in English.
Mm-hmm.
But, as I said, that the Catholic Church is not an emotional religion. It's not going to make you jump and shout. But within the Catholic churches that have predominantly black, they gear towards music and they gear towards sermons that will reach that inner core of blackness, where you will get that feeling through music. You will get that feeling through sermon. It's not going to make you want to scream and shout and what have you, but you will get that feeling that you really need, as opposed to a predominantly white church, which to me the music is dead,
right,
and the sermons are so. So that blackness is within the church that is predominantly black. They may even introduce things that are related to blackness, but I'm going to say nothing changes the system of how the church is laid out. It's simply you put things in or do things to make you feel more of your inner self.
Right. Okay. I noticed that there's a couple other communities I want to talk about real quickly because we only got about 6 more minutes on here. But I know there was a lot concentration of blacks around the Warrenton area, around the Naval Air Station in the Warrenton area. Then there's also another concentration of black there in the aviation field area there, and I don't know whether there was how that happened either. But can you address into that?
Well, the Warrenton was originally on Naval Air Station. And those people on Naval Air Station, they lived, part was base and part was Warrenton. And the people who were there, they worked for the Naval Air Station. They worked on foreign ships, so you had blacks who worked on other ships, and there were jobs related to Navy. Okay, when the Navy decided to expand, and they pushed everybody across the bridge. I heard stories about where people cut their houses in half and moved them across into what's now known as New Warrenton.
Oh, really?
And in that area, the demand for work at the Naval Air Station stayed there. So you had a good group of blacks who were still there because their jobs was at NAS. That's where their livelihood was, working for the Navy. So they stayed in that area. And that's why you have this black concentration in the Warrenton area. Most of these people worked in the Navy Yard. They were yardmen, service, or either whatever they did. That was their livelihood. That was nothing for them in Pensacola.
Right.
Now aviation field, I don't know. I know about the aviation field, but I don't know how it developed.
Okay.
Something that would have attracted them.
Well, let's talk about why is it called aviation field? There actually was an aviation field there before? How did it get his name?
As I understand, there was a flying field out there at one time.
Oh, okay.
And I assume it was probably military related.
Mm-hmm.
I've always heard the aviation field, aviation field. Then I
Yeah.
heard that there was a flying field located in that area. Now, why blacks gathered in that area, I don't know.
Okay.
But
Okay.
sometimes we see one of us and we tend to go there too. And next thing you know, we're all there.
Well, I'm assuming now. I'm assuming, just making an assumption here. After integration and maybe a little bit, the subdivision like Wedgewood and Lincoln Park start developing. Those are concentrations after. I'm assuming after integration. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, they came. Yeah, came around there like Wedgewood. Wedgewood was Wedgewood High School. That was an attempt by white school board members to give blacks a high-rated, top-quality school that would make them not want to go to a white school. So they built that there. Some of them got into, as you say, subdivisions. If there's a good subdivision, there are blacks there. Blacks are going to be more intended to go to a black subdivision than try to buy a house in a white subdivision.
Right.
So a lot of those were tactics to try to stall or put off integration.
Okay. All right, Martin, our time is up, but look, I really appreciate you taking your time out and talking to me about local black history. I'm sure other folks would benefit from it just like I have benefited from this. And but I want to thank you again for your participation, okay?
Okay, thank you very much. That as I said, there's a whole lot of stuff you can still add to it, but there's never enough time.
Yeah, never enough time. All righty then. Okay, folks, we're getting out of here. I appreciate your time and effort, and I'll see you on another edition. We're going to continue this series throughout the month of February and therefore we'll see you next time. Thank you.